I don't know about you, but I really like weird things that are done just for the sake of trying them out. And that's why I'm so into unorthodox PC cases, strange looking components, freaking sick cars like the Subaru Baja, and doing stupid stuff like this during live streams. And that's also why I now love this little 3D printed mouse built from the guts of a Razer Viper V2 Pro. If you don't already know, the YouTuber Optimum Tech painstakingly put together an ultralight 28-gram body mod for this specific mouse that he sells in limited drops on its own dedicated website called Zeromouse. Not to be confused with the Kickstarter project with the same name. That's a totally different thing. I first learned about the Zeromouse through this really condescending PCGamer.com article that talks about this thing like you're completely destroying the mouse and committing a war crime or something. In reality, all you're really doing is changing the shape of the thing and drastically cutting the device's weight. And at a glance, you can clearly tell the caveat is obviously that you're literally getting rid of most of the mouse in the process. The buttons on the Zeromouse get this new reverse click design, and depending on how you already hold your mouse, you might have to adopt a new grip method because there's no top to the thing. And you're also forgoing your side mouse buttons because there's no place to mount them on the side of the mouse. And on top of that, it also costs 69 funny US dollars plus the price of the Razer Viper V2 Pro, and it's clearly not for everybody. I also didn't realize this was Optimum's doing, and I was immediately way more interested once I learned that was the case. This man's got some good taste, and I will die on this hill. In this video about the Zeromouse, he talks about how he went through over 200 designs to get the mouse where it is today, and if nothing else, after watching that, I was just itching to grab a mouse and just start ripping its skin off. You know, a computer one, not a live one, of course. Problem was, by the time I caught wind of all this, they were fresh out of stock as Zeromouses. Nobody's even selling these things on eBay. They are not easy to come by. I noodled around to see if maybe there was a 3D printable file that Optimum uploaded at some point. Maybe I could grab like a beta version or something. No, and I was stupid to think that, frankly. But I did find this Zeromouse inspired STL file on Etsy for 5 bonerinos that I convinced Brett to buy for me, since that makes it a write-off or something. I don't know. What do I look like? Debbie's husband from that hit Bowling for Soup song 1985? It's a CPA joke. It's obviously not the exact same thing, but it's the same general idea, just way less refined. And I figured if I like this one, then I'll be mentally prepared for the next Zeromouse drop, if that ever happens. So this is how that went. Now, I'll be honest, I couldn't find an instructional video for assembly at all when I went to build this. I saw clips of some videos where people were scanning QR codes, and I just assumed that that was the only way I could get the instructions, so I had to wing it. And I know what you're thinking, Kyler, why not just scan the QR code on your screen from the one in the videos? Shut up. Also, it turns out that the code just leads to the freaking shop page for the Zeromouse. Yes, it was hidden in plain sight. Listen, I got it done regardless, and it was more fulfilling without instructions, if I do say so myself, so just bear with me here. Anyways, while the new body's printing, here's the white Viper V2 Pro we got for 40 bucks on eBay. It's used, but in pretty good condition, and it's still got the cables, receiver, and dock thing that a bunch of Razer mice have that lets you quickly swap between wireless and wired modes when your mouse dies by always resting on your desk. And it even still had the user manual, sticky grippies, and those sweet, sweet Razer stickers that make anything you put on them instantly cooler. Once the print was done, I got the gist of the Zeromouse clone pretty quickly. The way my fingers use it, they kind of just rest on the edge of the buttons that's closest to me, but immediately I knew I was gonna need some skates because the printed filament was not agreeing with the desk mat. And we'll get back to that later though. The new body's noticeably smaller than the Razer one, and it also seems pretty straightforward as to how it all goes together. You can see all the mounting holes and cutouts for things, and it's easy to visualize where things go, especially if you've seen Optimum's video on it. Before I started the actual install, I wanted to clean up the print a little bit. Full disclosure, I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to 3D printing, and the only instructions that were on the Etsy page for the Knockoff file were to try and print it at an angle so you don't get the supports attached to the clicky bits. I ended up just printing the whole thing vertically, which worked out fine for the most part. It just made some parts a little spaghetti-ish, which is why I cleaned things up a little bit with a Dremel and a pair of scissors a little bit before disassembling the Viper. To get into those Razer guts, I used a utility knife to peel up the skates on the bottom to expose the little screws that hold the top of the mouse onto the base, and the skates did not come off cleanly. I was excited to use one of our LTT screwdrivers for the project, but no can do, there wasn't a small enough bit for the screws Razer uses, so I needed to break out our little stash of iFixit tools to get the right one for the job. Thanks, Linus. With that out of the way, I cracked this little guy open, revealing the PCB. And with the insides now on the outside, you can really see how this is gonna go together. The battery's just glued onto a little piece of metal in there, and peeling that off reveals another screw that let me take the metal off of the frame. A couple more screws held the PCB onto the frame, and with those removed, the whole Jimmy John just popped right out. I couldn't fit it directly into the new 3D printed frame, but after taking out the scroll wheel and applying what felt like an unsafe amount of force, that fella was ready to get screwed. Wink at camera. Actually wink at the camera and read that out loud. The extra fun part about this custom build is you don't need any special screws either. The exact same ones used to hold the original mouse together are all that's needed. And you don't even use all of them, so go ahead and swallow a couple if you're following along at home. Also, just a side note, if Etsy comments are to be trusted, it looks like you can easily install your own custom scroll wheel if you want. So that's cool. I waited to have most of the thing assembled before yanking out the side button panel because I was afraid of breaking something, but it turned out to just be idiot proof and just pulled straight out. I thought there might be like a little latch or something to take the ribbon cable out, but it turns out I'm just the exact type of person they'd consider might try this one day. A fool. The scroll wheel pops back in with a little finagling, but at this point, because of me grossly overestimating my ability to 3D print things properly, I had to take it back out and cut a few little spaghetti dangly bits, which was my nickname in college, with this here utility knife before it stayed in the little groove properly. Now the battery could go back in. It gets plugged in just like it was before, but now we're just reusing the stickiness of the glue to stick it right on top of the sensor, and it should just stay there. Hopefully. Also, I didn't see anyone leaving the little foam piece on the top of the battery in the pictures online, so I ripped that thing off and freaking ate it. I chewed it up and swallowed it. It's in my tummy now. I'm just kidding. I threw it away in the proper trash receptacle responsibly like a good American boy. Back to what I was saying earlier about skates. I was gonna need some of those since this was just a straight up 3D printed mouse with absolutely nothing smooth on the bottom. If you buy the actual Zeromouse, it comes with little circular ones to put on the bottom so it glides across a mouse pad properly. But naturally, this one didn't come with that. It was literally a file download. How would that work? And I'm feeling like I wanna save a couple clams, you feel me? Have you seen how expensive these things can get? The joke is that they're not expensive. So I just took out the old skates from the original Viper I just finished bastardizing and snipped them into these cute little circles to put on the corners of my knockoff Zeromouse. Now this is all already pretty jank, but since the sticky parts got all ruined when I took them off originally, I had to use little pieces of double-sided mounting tape to get them sticky again. In the end, everything ended up weighing 28.5 grams, just half a gram heavier than the actual Zeromouse is supposed to be. It might not look super pretty up close, but actually isn't nearly as functionally bad as you'd expect, which is coincidentally how my mom describes me to her friends. I went to try out the Zeromouse clone with a little bit of twitchy shooter aim trainer gaming, but the power went out right as I was about to. Luckily, we were streaming at the time, so I captured the super high octane moment as it happened. That looked really unexciting, but it was actually very scary, okay? The lights were flickering and it felt like Cloverfield for like 8 seconds. But since I was back up and running, I decided to try out this game I played last like a decade ago called Dirty Bomb. Anybody know that? It was small and relatively easy to run. But Kyler, why don't you just play Counter-Strike? Oh, look at me. I watch videos online and I make sense. Zeromouse and its clones, let's call it bare bones design, isn't gonna be for everyone. You pretty much have to grip it with your thumb, ring finger, and pinky on these.
Probably grasp it!
You pretty much have to grip it with your thumb, ring finger, and pinky on these sides while your pointer finger and middle fingers rest on the clicky buttons. You can't rest your hand on the device since there's literally nowhere for your palm to go, and you run the risk of breaking the thing if you push too hard on the buttons, which have to flex in order to push them onto the switches below them. Our first attempt at the print actually had a slip up where it briefly ran out of filament, and since it was being printed vertically on its end like this, and the print was about halfway up the buttons at that point, it made them so weak that a couple test presses snapped it right off. I also ran into the issue of the new body not properly supporting the included USB-C cable. The plastic part around the connector is too fat to fit inside of the little slot it's designed for, so when you plug it in, it bends and changes the sensitivity and sound of the clicks because of the different tension that's being put on the buttons. Of course, certain little stuff like this I can't also assume are still a problem with Optimum Tech's product. In practice, I actually really like using this little thing too. It sets out to be a loose replica of a meticulously crafted, ultra lightweight, no-nonsense gaming mouse. The whole concept is somehow equal parts modest and incredibly over the top. And honestly, I can't tell if the Etsy seller's paying homage to Optimum or trying to be like, Look how easy that was. I'm just kind of telling myself it's the former for my own sanity though. It didn't take me as long as you'd expect to get used to the unique grip either. Don't use this footage as a great example of that though. I'm just really garbage at this game. Thing is, once my hand's on the mouse, I'm good to go. At first I needed to be intentional with pressing specifically along the bottom edges of the buttons, but it became muscle memory really quickly. And same with the thumb, ring finger, and pinky grip style. Honestly, the weirdest part of the whole thing is when I go to blindly reach for the mouse. I've been using it for a couple days now just while working, and this is the only part that strikes me as weird anymore. There's no butt meat on the mouse, so to speak, for my palm to catch on as I slide it across the table. The thing's so light that I end up missing it with my hand, bumping it and sliding it an inch or two away from me. And since my mind's not used to grabbing something that shape or weight to move my cursor around, I just kind of automatically go reaching around in other places on the desk before I realize, oh hey, you're using that weird mouse now. At which point I take my eyes off the screen, visually locate the mouse, and then continue going about my day. It definitely works better as a gaming mouse than when you should be using for work. Not that Zeromouse claims to be anything like a productivity tool specifically, but I think this might do well as a second mouse that you keep on hand for competitive gaming, because that's where it really shines. It strips away all the non-essential parts of a mouse, and if you're so competitive that lower weight gives you a desirable edge, then this thing might be for you. That doesn't really describe me as a person, but I actually really want one of the actual Zeromouse now, but it's mostly because I'm just drawn to strange stuff. The one I got on Etsy is cool and interesting, but it feels kind of like a demo compared to a full game. You know, like this is the right weight and form factor, but Optimum's has more ergonomic principles and build quality in mind. And I really like to try that out. If you're at all interested in this font of mouse, I highly recommend checking out Zeromouse.co if you want a heads up next time there's a drop. They're iteratively improving on their design every time it's necessary to, and when they're next available, it might just be exactly what you're looking for. Or you could just watch Optimum's videos on the mouse design. I'm sure he'd be jazzed about that too. Thanks for watching, and tell your dad I said hi.